June 18, 1815. The small Belgian village of Waterloo became the stage for one of the most decisive battles in European history. On one side stood Napoleon Bonaparte, the brilliant French general who had conquered most of Europe. On the other, a coalition of forces led by Britain's Duke of Wellington and Prussia's Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. This is the story of Napoleon's final gamble and the day that changed the fate of Europe forever. After escaping exile on the island of Elba in March 1815, Napoleon returned to France in a blaze of glory. In just 100 days, he rebuilt his army and reclaimed power. But Europe wasn't about to let him rule again. The Seventh Coalition was formed: Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, and others, determined to defeat him once and for all. Napoleon's plan was simple: strike fast, defeat his enemies separately before they could unite. His first target: the Allied forces in Belgium. Napoleon commanded about 73,000 soldiers, disciplined, experienced, and fiercely loyal. The Duke of Wellington had around 68,000 troops from Britain, the Netherlands, Hanover, and other allies. Meanwhile, the Prussians under Blücher had 50,000 men marching to join Wellington. Napoleon knew that if these two armies met, his chances would vanish. So he moved to split them apart. The day began with heavy rain, turning the fields into muddy swamps. This slowed Napoleon's artillery, one of his greatest advantages. At around 11:30 a.m., the French attacked the farmhouse of Hougoumont, a stronghold on Wellington's right flank. It was supposed to be a diversion, but the fighting there became fierce and dragged on for hours, consuming thousands of French troops. In the early afternoon, Napoleon launched a massive assault on Wellington's center. French infantry advanced in tight columns, drums beating, flags waving. But Wellington's troops held their ground, using the reverse slopes of the ridge to shield themselves from French artillery. Wave after wave crashed against the Allied line and failed. Frustrated, Napoleon sent in his heavy cavalry, the fearsome cuirassiers in shining armor. They thundered across the field, expecting to break the British lines. But Wellington had formed infantry squares, four-sided formations bristling with bayonets. The French cavalry swirled around them, unable to penetrate. It was a spectacular but costly failure. By late afternoon, the distant sound of cannon fire grew louder on Napoleon's right flank. The Prussians had arrived. Blücher's forces began pressing against the French, forcing Napoleon to divert troops to hold them back. This meant fewer men to attack Wellington, and the balance of the battle began to shift. At around 7 p.m., Napoleon played his last card: the Imperial Guard, his most elite soldiers. They marched up the slope toward the Allied line, confident they would smash through. But they were met with devastating musket fire and cannon shot. The Guard faltered, then retreated. For the first time, Napoleon's veterans turned and ran. The cry went up across the battlefield: "La Garde recule! The Guard is retreating!" The retreat of the Guard spread panic. The French army broke and fled in chaos. Wellington ordered his troops forward, and the Prussians struck from the side. By nightfall, the French were in full flight. Napoleon's dream of reclaiming his empire was over. Napoleon fled to Paris, but within weeks, he surrendered to the British. He was exiled again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would spend the rest of his life. The Battle of Waterloo ended more than 20 years of war in Europe and ushered in a century of relative peace. It was the final chapter in the career of one of history's greatest and most controversial March leaders.